Megan.
After the enormously successful Mathregan being another example of it being possible for January releases to not be total duds, thanks to largely the brilliant marketing, propaganda, people creating TikToks about the silly dance, the film far exceeded its expected output. Since it made over $180 million on a $12 million budget, those are insane stats. Hell, the film was so big because of pop culture influence that even legends of the past acknowledged her, in their own way.
Little bitch, she stole my moves.
I personally was generally indifferent about the movie, but not gonna lie, I ended up liking it more than disliking it. The cutesy gimmick of the viral dance and appealing to just the humor of it resonating with younger audiences was, well, cute. However, I think had they not reduced it to a PG-13 rating just because they noticed the boom and attention it received to maximize its profits, I would have liked it way more though, because it probably would have had more of a horror feel to it. You already had the great casting of Allison Williams, who's amazing in Get Out and The Perfection. Nothing was offensively bad about the movie, and to be honest, it had a well-intentioned, timely message about how dangerously easy we can be dependent on tech and AI. 2.0 basically does the T2 approach in where the premise of the original is a robot gone wild tries to kill everybody, and now it's a super robot gone wild trying to kill everybody, and Megan is no longer evil. So now the family needs Megan's help to stop her. However, there's a catch. She needs to be upgraded, and clearly the upgrade is going from being a January low-budget robot to a certified badass killer summer blockbuster budget machine. It's strange because the cruelest part of this series, because it's certainly gonna get milked for at least a couple more sequels, is that the original could have been a standalone, solid little horror adjacent flick. But at the same time, I'm honestly shocked that we got a sequel because the studio must have known how much of a one-hit wonder the original was. And the sequel feels so different in tone because really it's more of an action comedy abandoning the horror elements of the original. And based on the direction it feels like we're going, we're just gonna keep straying more and more away from horror, and that sucks because we would have had a cute little horror franchise in the making if they really had the confidence of moving forward with this character in the first place. But alas, it wasn't programmed that way. Tonally, this movie is a bit of a mess because for as light as the original was, it felt confident in what it was. This movie can't figure out its configuration balance of horror to action to comedy ratios. And it's even more bizarre because Gerard Johnstone directed both of these movies, with the caveat that he didn't write the original, but he did write the sequel. This movie is also so hammy. And you know, it's in line with the concepts involved, and hey, sometimes the jokes actually worked, but there's so many other times where you're just like, come on, that was not necessary. Like, did it really need a quip there? No, it didn't. In many ways, it's similar to the original, and just like the original, Megan 2.0 is rated PG-13, and again I say, it would have benefited from having that R rating. Child's Play 2019 was a solid film, outside of that horrifying look on Chucky.
You are horrifying to look at.
And this series could have been that and more because it wasn't restrained by the pre-established rules that confines Chucky. And unfortunately, it's gone and done its own thing, whatever that looks like, because it's still extremely profitable. The performances are probably the most consistent part of the movie. Again, just like in the original, nobody's doing a terrible job outside of Cole. He had no business being in this movie with how uninterested and disconnected he felt. It was just a terrible miscasting. And they feel like they're the same characters of the original just 2 years later, and in a movie as wishy-washy as this one, it's very much appreciated. Like I said before, Allison Williams is an amazing actor. Gemma's character is probably the least interesting part of the original, but that has nothing to do with Williams' performance. But I do think that the sequel does serve as a good redemption arc for Gemma because I actually like what they do with her development. Megan herself is still the most memorable part of the film. She's still witty and sassy, and she's got enough attitude that still makes her extremely charming. Like, if you didn't like her in the first movie, she's just gonna get worse in the sequel, but if you did find her entertaining in the first one, she won't disappoint in 2.0. But in a funny way, you can also see her evolve in between movies, and it's almost like seeing a kid grow up. So it kind of evokes Inside Out vibes where you see Riley still being herself, but also grow up with the movies. Or hell, Daniel Radcliffe in the Harry Potter movies, where it's cute to see these characters just grow up. These movies are so dependent on how likable Megan is, because if she doesn't resonate, the whole thing falls apart, even with Allison Williams running around. And to be honest, there's actually a good message here in a monologue by Megan herself, kinda lecturing Gemma about the struggles of learning how to love and accepting that everyone's got their own way of showing it. Megan is such a likable character that it's to the point that Emilia's character is completely eclipsed by Megan. Like, you don't feel her threat at all because of how much the movie feels like it's gonna make sure that Megan wins. Even though the narrative claimed there was a world-ending threat, the tension never really got there for me, and despite Emilia's performance not being bad at all, I never really felt like she was a real problem. She just ended up feeling like more of a nuisance that was eventually gonna get squashed. And she does bring interesting things to the table, but the movie just breezes by it all so fast that it's like instead of spending time on quips and jokes, explore that and it would have merited more of the runtime. Higher budgets tend to mean more time in the writing room, so the plot in the second film is way more convoluted than the first one, and it also means that there's much more of a runtime. At least in this case, since the original is about 90 minutes and Megan 2.0 is peaking 2 hours. Having Megan be the EV stand-in is cute, but it becomes dull pretty quickly, especially since half the runtime is without Megan in full form anyway. I don't see why the most interesting part about these movies was sidelined for so long, because as soon as she starts doing her bits, you can immediately tell that the entertainment value elevates. And to be fair, there's some fun ideas injected in here too, like it actually made sense thematically that Megan is no longer evil, because in universe it's explained that she was still learning and understanding her programming in the first film, which is why she was erratic and impulsive. Basically, she was a child, simple as that. Now she's had time to learn and adapt like in real life tech does. You know, the algorithm and all that. So her going good I actually bought, and I didn't think of it as her being defanged or anything like that. And some of the sequences were actually a lot of fun where they were able to have some clever moments of Megan using the smart house to aid in basically opening drawers or throwing ice on the ground. And the action, while not groundbreaking, it was actually very well done, and a lot of the camera work and choreography was very reminiscent of Leigh Whannell's Upgrade, which was a very pleasant surprise. Certainly could have still used a shorter runtime to not feel like it's dragging its feet for so long. 2 hours is too long and unnecessary. And in a tighter script, you could have explored the ideas that were introduced regarding Emilia, because those were actually very interesting. Because as it stands, Emilia was cool conceptually, but she was so thin as a character. Megan 2.0 is a step down, mainly because for better or worse, it was in a strong position to do something interesting with this franchise, and instead, it just chose to be silly. And even in that regard, the original was more entertaining because the dark comedy felt more prominent in that film. Still has heart put into it, I guess. The performances are not bad, so it's definitely miles ahead of something like Until Dawn or Opus. Yeah, remember those came out this year too. But that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe, and sincerely yours, Anthony.